Hello, and welcome back to Connect and Collaborate, a podcast of the Colorado Business Roundtable brought to you by ACEC Colorado. I'm really excited to be coming back here for a second round with you gentlemen and learning more about the design build and progressive design build process. So in this segment, we want to get into a little bit of the roles as well as some misconceptions. But first, I just want to give you all a chance to reintroduce yourselves in case we have some listeners coming in just for this second half. Dave, do you want to go ahead and start us off again?
I will. My name is Dave Crawford. I was with Sundt Construction during my entire career, really, and worked in a variety of positions there. And we were involved in a number of aspects in the construction industry, from commercial building to a lot of highway and bridge work, heavy civil work, and industrial work on the water and wastewater treatment plant side, heavy manufacturing, some mining facilities, that type of thing. But we were particularly involved, and I was heavily involved in passage of legislation in several states regarding alternate project delivery, especially CM at risk, design build, both qualifications-based selection or progressive design build, best value design build, and job order contracting for smaller projects. So we'll talk about some of those things again in the second half here, but lots of fun, very interesting on that side.
Excellent. And how about yourself, Bill?
Bill Green, president of the RMH Group. We're a mechanical and electrical consulting firm. We do primarily very technical projects in aerospace, data centers, central plants, industrial facilities, that sort of thing. We've been involved with design build projects since the late 90s. We've done 250 design build projects. The good, the bad, and the ugly is what we've seen. And we think design build can be an outstanding method if it's done right.
Excellent. And how about a reintroduction for yourself?
And I'm Dave Poling, a senior manager with Wilson & Company. Spent a lot of the last 16, 17 years working on almost exclusive design build projects. All of my experience, however, has been in transportation type projects.
Excellent. So that's more the horizontal space compared to the vertical productions projects you were talking about earlier. I'll throw this out there to any and all of you, but I'd like our listeners to learn a little bit more about the various roles on these projects. What are the architects doing? What are the engineers doing and the contractors? And how do they work together in a productive way?
How about, let me lead with that one. I'll let you add in. How's that? The roles are probably not dramatically different to some extent. Keenan, an architect's still going to be responsible for design, the engineer responsible for design, the contractor for building, but you are working as a team and you're soliciting ideas from each other. You really are trying to put the project in the middle of the table, so to speak, and then work around it. So what can we do to make each other successful? What can we do to make each other better? How can we perform as a team? How can we provide greater value to the owner, so the owner gets better bang for the buck? Dave mentioned last time, it's not unusual to have a fixed budget for a job, be it horizontal or industrial or building. Here's all the money I have. Tell me how much bang I can get for the buck. I want to get the most I can out of this, because a lot of these projects, they go to an alternate form of delivery, i.e. progressive design build, because it's a facility that requires special people. So we're going to hire scientists to come in. Scientists today are like free agents in baseball. So if you want a Class A free agent or a Class A scientist, you're going to have to give them Class A equipment. You just got through building a project and you put Class B equipment in it because you thought you were going to save some money. Now you can't hire the people you want. So basically, you're a Class B or Class C, and somebody else is going to get the Class A guy. So it's getting your team to respond within their role to the best of their ability, to be creative, to be innovative, to create collaboration, and to create trust. Those are the words you hear all the time, are collaboration and trust among that. And it's not that they have to be different. Well, they do have to be different in that they have to be willing to work together with other people, but they don't have to assume a completely different responsibility. We're not asking the architect to be a structural engineer. That's it. So it's a little different that way. And you may comment on that. You've been involved in those things.
Right. Well, I think design build is thought of as either progressive or regular design build as the way to always save money, accelerate schedule, increase quality. I think that is only possible when both the owner and the design build team are educated in the process. If any one of those people comes from perhaps a hard bid mentality and they bring that to the process won't be successful. It will look like a hard bid process. So I think the teamwork is what makes it work, but also the education makes it work.
Interesting. So, Dave, I know last segment you were talking about the co-location and really getting the various parts of the project, different teams to be working together, sending less emails and being able to sit down more in person. And you're describing that those can work really well, or maybe if people come from different backgrounds, less experience with that, and they're fighting a little hard charging in a way, it might not work as well. Is that what you're describing?
Right.
Absolutely.
I think you're going to ask Dave to comment on this because he's had it on the horizontal side as much. But we found that, you're going to view this, whether you're an architect, an engineer, or a builder, is this an opportunity or a threat? Because it's going to require different people, different culture, different process, different contract. And if you don't want to do those things, then that's going to be a threat. And you're going to decide, I'll just stay out of this. I think if you do that, wow, that sounds interesting. That sounds exciting. I like to be part of that team. Then you're going to go into that. Our best projects relative to design build were always when we co-located everybody through pre-construction and construction. And Dave, I don't know how much you've seen of that, but it may be worth coming at. We insisted on that, and I always thought we got great results from that. There's always excuses, well, I can't put people here, I can't put people there. Well, then the job, instead of being 100% successful, maybe it's going to be 70% successful. So what do you want to do here? Answer it. But
I would agree with everything you guys have been saying. I think what's good, what's beneficial, what you get from co-location, what you get from design build, be it progressive or the traditional, is opportunities for innovation. And that innovation can come in a lot of different forms, and it can come from a lot of different people and a lot of different ideas. And if you co-locate, if you've got a knowledgeable owner, if you've got team members that are willing to be honest and open, that is what creates those opportunities for innovation. I was involved in a project where, it was almost as a fleeting comment, but the contractor, his team, I don't remember if it was the designer, but I think it was the contractor, actually had an idea to build a temporary bridge, which eliminated a phase of construction, which eliminated a lot of traffic impacts, but that temporary bridge cost extra money. So traditionally, the owner would say, we got to keep the budget down. But the idea, the concept, the discussion with everybody around the table focusing on the project, like Dave said, the more that idea got legs, it was like, well, spending that extra money on a temporary throwaway bridge saves 3 months in construction, eliminates a lot of traffic impacts. That's money well spent. So, that idea, that concept moved forward. And if it wasn't a design build type delivery, that idea would have been lost. The savings, the time savings would have been lost, and you would have been just marching on like you typically would. So that's kind of an example of, you pay a little, but you got a lot more benefit for those dollars that you spent.
Interesting.
Sometimes these roles and responsibilities, you asked us about the architects and engineers, but they also relate to the subcontractors and some of the craftsmen on the projects. Because if we talk about an electrical or mechanical subcontractor, we're going to team up with Bill and RMH, and we're going to expect those guys to meet our budget, our schedule, our quality considerations, our operational constraints, whatever we may have around that, we're counting on them to be innovative and creative and come back with a solution that meets that. And sometimes that's going to come from a craft guy that's putting this work in. He's going to have a better idea than all of us sitting around this table, I can tell you. There's plenty of smart people in the field that have done this. Just as Dave said, have you thought about doing this? No, none of us thought about doing that, but that's a great idea. Let's put it in place and we'll do that. But that's the benefit of getting multiple heads at the table, because they're going to look at that problem from their experience and think, wow, that's really hard the way you're describing it, but let me do it this way and I can do this in half the time and half the effort. And you'll end up with the same quality.
Wow.
So I've seen it a lot of times in my career where ideas came from people that were actually installing the work, not from all of us around the table, and they were a lot better idea than any of us came up with by far. So there's lots of good people in our industry. You're trying to reach out and get solutions from a lot of people, whatever their particular role may be in the project.
That's fascinating. Wow. So in addition to kind of breaking out which firms or groups are doing the different activities, those companies themselves are looking at their front line, their technicians, and you guys are all meeting on a regular basis in order to bring these ideas together. Are we on the right track? Here's a different option. How does that process go? I know you've mentioned co-location, but there's very regular meetings with the owner, with the other firms.
With a little bit of everybody. I mean, I'll give you an example of one. This comes back to this Cronkite building. I just happened to think of a minute ago. We got laid into the job. There's a massive ornate stairway, goes from ground level to floor 2. That's going to be an architectural monument to some extent. Everybody knew that. And we threw a budget at it. I don't know what the budget, let's say it's $100,000. I don't know what it was. But there was no design on this thing for months. And Terry Aber, our project manager, called a meeting one day and said, we need to start work on this stairway because I've got to get it fabricated and we're down there. So he had the structural steel people come in. They were doing the stairway. They had the architects, some other people, and they sat around the table just like us in one afternoon and designed this stairway. And they incorporated the mechanical ductwork into the stairway up at the landing, which was a pretty unique idea. Somebody said, I don't have any room for that. And they said, well, let's just run it through the stairs then. So they ran it through the stairs, and you would have never known it. But it was a great solution to the problem. But they came out, and then they went away, and next day estimated the thing and said, yeah, we can do it for that budget, whatever we're at. But they went through a couple iterations they knew were too expensive right off the bat, so let's go to plan B. We'll just design it and draw it right here this afternoon because we have to get it out and get it fabricated. But same thing. But so there's a lot of meetings that take place that have smaller groups of people talking about specific projects. In Dave's world, you're going to have a group designing bridges and a group designing pavement and a group designing retaining walls and a group doing underground utilities. But you're trying to break a project down into bite-sized pieces and then get the right people in that area to look at it and approach it that way. So
fascinating.
It makes it interesting, and it's what makes it fun about our business.
Yeah, no two projects are exactly alike, I'm sure. Keep getting better and better with each one. I'm curious about what you guys were mentioning about the education of maybe the project owner or the client. And it's interesting, in some of your cases, it seems like there's engineers that know roads, though there's also the taxpayers who don't necessarily know, or maybe you'll have a company building request, but they don't necessarily know how it should be done. What would you guys describe are the ways that the engineering and construction industry, the design industry, could help educate the end users of the buildings, or definitely the project owners kind of commissioning and asking for these projects?
Lots of education would be highly beneficial, and that's up to industry participants to provide that, Keenan. So we have the ACEC, we have the Associated General Contractors, we have the AIA, we have the Subcontractors Association, but I think it's an opportunity for industry to respond and help educate, particularly some of the owners. Some of the owners know, I want to get this, I want it more, I want it faster, I want it cheaper, I want all the above, but how do I do that? Sometimes we can help educate the owners, because every good project is led by a good owner. And bad projects are almost always led by owners that lack education. They're not intentional. They lack it, and they do something that really is a hurdle to overcome for the team, as opposed to making it easier. We're making it harder. And education really is critical all the way around the table on that, and how we provide it and who it comes from. So I think some joint education could be good from a variety of industry organizations, Design Build Institute of America, obviously, for design build work, because they have the knowledge base. They also have case studies, so they can tell you, here's what worked on these types of projects. Here's what didn't work. Just as importantly, it's, you want to know what worked and what didn't work. You don't want to go to the same movie 3 times. The ending doesn't change. If it didn't work here, it's probably not going to work again. So move on. But education is, we don't have enough conversations about it. You're probably right about that. I would say we need more education. We're not having enough conversation about it.
And I think that education helps communicate and describe the various risks that each entity is kind of carrying with the project. And I think that, at least from my experience, is one of the greatest misunderstandings, or, everybody's not aware of the risk that the contractor's carrying, the designer or the architect, and probably vice versa. That side may or may not understand the risk that the owner is also faced with. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that risk, in my opinion, gets measured in dollars. So, it either drives the price up, or you can be successful, meet your budget, and at the same time get the project you want. But if those risk profiles aren't understood, clearly communicated, if there's not that mutual respect, that's where a project can go south very quickly and have a lot of finger pointing at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest problem our industry faces is inappropriate risk shifting, where the owner shifts too much risk to the design build team because they think, well, it's design build, you ought to be able to take that risk. If it's inappropriate and the team gets in trouble, then the owner doesn't win. Certainly. Also, within the participants of the design build team, if too much risk is shifted perhaps to the designers, and the general contractor doesn't kind of shoulder what he can, then again, you have an unsuccessful project.
Good point. I mean, that risk allocation really is important, and it's good to discuss that. I think industry standard contracts help on this because they've been jointly negotiated by everybody at the table. So you get I know one project we looked at was in Kensworld, a highway job, and the owner wanted to put right of way in our side. And we had and they changed it because we had a conversation. We said, how can we be responsible for right of way? We're not a government entity. We can't condemn we can't do anything about this. If they don't want to sell the property to us, we could be a year from now before anything can happen. This really has to be on your side of the table. You have the only power to do this. And they eventually did that. But that isn't how it came out. It came out that all of a sudden we have right of way responsibility, which is impossible for all intents and purposes. But, that's, again, like Bill said, that just came out. And I don't know if somebody was ill-intentioned. They just didn't understand, well, it's design build. Surely they're going to do all this. No, that, education or lack of education probably in that case. Same thing again, so.
Well, and I think that those conversations about risk need to take place up front when you're proposing on the project. You need to have the conversation with your team members. Who's taking this risk? Are you? Am I? Because later in the project, when that risk raises its ugly head, that's not the time you should be talking about it. You should have said, okay, I carry design risk, you carry construction risk. I don't carry construction risk, kind of thing.
That's a really good point. I think, everybody's licensed to do a certain thing and they carry insurance to do a certain thing. So if you're falling in the crack somewhere, you want to have a conversation about it before it happens, hopefully. Will you be perfect on that? Maybe not, but having a conversation helps on some of those things that, wait a minute, we don't have coverage for that. Do you have coverage for that? No, I don't have coverage for that. Well, who does? Maybe nobody. Then you really want to have a conversation about that, because how are we going to take care of this? How are we going to resolve that? Can we resolve it, or does it have to go someplace else? But those are really good conversations to have. And if you can that conversation can be proactive rather than reactive, that's a huge deal. Because reactive, everybody's, wait a minute, I called, and it's like calling for fire insurance after the building burned down. Who had fire insurance? You'd like to know about it ahead of time, that I've got it. Somebody's got fire insurance.
Good to know up front. Absolutely. And so I just wanted to reiterate what you were mentioning. Want to thank ACEC for helping with some of this education in the industry, and want to just re-mention, Dave, your organization with Design Build Institute of America. You mentioned case studies. That's an invaluable way to learn what worked for this type of project, or a similar one that myself as an owner might be looking at. What are some other ways project owners can educate themselves before starting a process with some of that lack of understanding and getting themselves in trouble?
Well, the Design Build Institute does hold certification classes, and every owner should get DBIA certified. They should have at least one person on their staff, and hopefully the person working on the project is certified. And many of those classes can be in-house. DBIA will come in and teach them. So that is a must. And keeping knowledgeable people involved with the project is also critical. People tend to move as the project goes on, and if you lose your expert, then things can go south.
That certification program really is a good point that Bill makes there, because it gives you a starting point, a level playing field for design build. And it's for all the practitioners and the owners. So it's not like it's limited to one piece or the other, but it's good background. DBA will come to your facility to do it. We had them at our facility several times for people to get certified. Barb Jackson is right here in Denver at the University of Denver now, and she's taught 100 of those classes, I'm sure, over the years. And and that's third-party certification. That's not you and I telling each other we know about it. That's a third party saying, these people have got at least some level of understanding and knowledge. And if it costs a couple $1,000s, when you think about a project from an owner, I've had this conversation with owners, you can tell, said you're going to invest $10,000 in 5 people, and we're going to go out and build a $50 million project. If it costs $51 million, what's the return? How much did you lose on that $10,000? So it's a good investment at that point. That's not an expense. That's an investment in the success of the project and the success of your people. So Bill makes a really good point. That is one good basis. We can provide education through a lot of industry groups, but DBA is set up to provide third-party certification, and that has worked out to be very well over the past 14, 15 years now, probably, something like that.
Excellent. So those are great resources for the project owners. While we have some listeners here throughout the internet, what would you describe to some of the more general public who's not quite aware of this process? How would you like to help educate them in a little bit of a way, whether we're driving on roads or maybe other taxpayer dollars, or just a university student who is a client and is building a project? What would you describe to them, the general public?
You might just describe the characteristics of your team that we talked about in the first session. Here's what makes this a better project. But I'm going to give you one quote as you were talking about that. We've had this conversation this morning, but this was on qualifications-based selection. And it came from 2 city engineers, Phoenix and Glendale, where I was from, and I worked with these guys, and they've probably both done 1,000 jobs or something. So this is not like they're 1 or 2 project people. But they were asked by an owner, well, how can you trust the contractor? And you can put, how can you trust the engineer? How can you trust the architect? Put whoever you want in there. But this question was, how do you trust the contractor? And their response was, it's not about time and money. It's about people, trust, and culture. Time, money, quality are the result. I thought those guys hit it right on the nail. This is about, if more people understood that part of it alone, that would answer your question, Keenan. This isn't about time and money. It's about people, trust, and culture. Time and money and all those other things are what comes out the other side when you have a good team and you trust them and they collaborate with each other. So those guys hit it right on the head on that one.
People, trust, and culture. I love that. I'm going to write that down here for myself. I really appreciate all of you coming in and sharing your knowledge and your wisdom, your experience from these projects, and some guidance for us as potential future project owners or people who are using these projects. Really appreciate your insights and wisdom here. So Dave, Bill, and Dave, thank you so much for coming on here today.
Thank you, Keenan.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you to our listeners for listening to Connect and Collaborate, a podcast of the Colorado Business Roundtable, brought to you by ACEC Colorado. And I've been your on-air producer, Keenan Brew. Thanks.